Do do do, theme song. Do do do, I'm broke so this is my theme song. Do do do, just imagine this is an awesome theme song. Do do, theme song. Left of the box. And we are live. Hello, welcome to Left of the Box. Bonjour, bienvenue. I'm Sandy, and this is Tim.
Yes, it's Tim. Hi.
But just to quickly answer your question that you were asking me during the intro song, when I initially started live streaming, I was hoping to keep it down to 2 hours. A short live stream for me now is 3 hours.
Wow, you really go.
Longest has been over 6. Because I end up
6 hours, one shot?
Yeah, I end up just chatting with people in the sandbox, so it just kind of happens. But
Mm,
when I have a guest on, like specifically, this is a guest live stream, and it's okay. We'll hour and a half. That's fine. Especially
right.
it's morning, and I'm not a morning person. So anyway, welcome everyone. So far in the sandbox, we have Good for Gabby, hermatologist, Jet, and MIDI doctors. So, Tim, you are from the New Evangelicals. Why don't you tell my audience just a little bit about you?
Okay. Well, yes, my name is Tim Whitaker. I started an organization called the New Evangelicals really by accident. Started an account on Instagram that kind of blew up, and now we do all this podcasting, live streaming, Instagram, TikTok, etc. We're a digital first organization. We help people find essentially a better path forward in their faith away from evangelical and Christian fundamentalism and Christian nationalism. We also hold space for folks who have been hurt by the church, and we advocate for accountability inside of the church. So I'm a Christian, I'm a follower of Jesus, but and I grew up in conservative Christianity. So essentially, what has given the world Trump, I grew up in that world, and I rejected it strongly in about maybe 2015, 2016. And then that led me to kind of rethink what I believe, why I believe it. And that led me to find a much more, I would argue, loving, human flourishing oriented faith that now I embody.
Hmm, wonderful. Okay, I just got the thumbs up because I always get paranoid that I've done something wrong and that people aren't hearing or seeing us properly, but I got a thumbs up. Uh, Okay, so we'll get more into like why I brought you on and everything in a moment, but I do
Okay.
have a little fun thing that I like to do to Americans coming onto my show for the first time. It's a bit of initiation. It's just meant for fun. And don't
I'm
worry,
ready.
you won't be the worst. You could only ever tie for the worst.
Okay, fair.
Canadian pop quiz.
Oh boy. Just put me at the bottom.
Yeah, because like I feel like there should be more cross-border solidarity, and you guys only have two neighbors.
Yeah.
And especially with things like the tariffs going on right now, just the
Mhm.
culture and the crossover with the economic situations, people's personal lives and everything, it would make sense for Americans to know a little bit more about your neighbors to the north. And so the questions I ask are just questions I know the reverse of. So I'm not going to ask you anything like who is the third prime minister, because I don't even know.
Okay.
So just some basic, simple Canadian questions. What is a toque?
Um, hmm. Well, in Lord of the Rings, doesn't he say that? Like you fool of a toque or something at one point? I don't know. What is a toque? Is it short for a tunic?
N-
No. Then I don't know.
It's a beanie.
Oh, a beanie? Okay.
Yeah,
A, a
a
toque, a
toque.
beanie. Okay.
Winter toque.
Okay.
Yeah,
Noted.
no.
Noted.
It wasn't until I was watching a lot of leftist content from the States and they were making fun of Tim Pool's beanie all the time that I realized you even called it something different.
Yes. No, we definitely call it a beanie for
Mhm.
sure. I've only ever heard it referred to as that.
Yeah. And it's spelled Toque. So,
Oh, Toque.
mhm.
Okay. I learn something new
Toque.
every day.
Yeah.
Toque.
Uh, Capital of Canada.
Montreal, Quebec. I have no idea. I was homeschooled for 9 years. I had no quality education here, okay? I
Um,
have no idea.
Ottawa.
Ottawa. Yeah, of course, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Ottawa.
People who are into sports sometimes guess that one.
No, I know. The problem, as you know, being a content creator is that you live in a bubble
Yeah.
following certain kinds of content and nothing else reaches your brain.
Hmm.
This is one of those moments.
Well, the vast majority of people seem to think it's Toronto, so I refer to Toronto as the American capital of Canada.
Mm, fair enough.
Because that's what most
Ottawa,
people
Canada.
guess. Quebec is a province, and then there's Quebec City, which is in Quebec, and Montreal is a city in Quebec as well.
Yeah,
Um,
see how little I know.
hmm How many
Yeah.
provinces are there?
Oh, I 10.
Yes,
Really? I mean, yeah, I knew that. Duh,
there.
10,
You're not going to be at the
obviously.
bottom.
Oh, thank God. Yeah, I knew there were
Love
10
that
the whole
random
time.
guess being right.
Yeah, I was praying. It's like, just Lord lead me, and
Mhm.
here I am.
Yeah, it's 10 provinces and 3 territories. So, yeah, you actually got one.
Woo. Oh, okay, thank God. I feel a lot better now.
Well, you might not like the next question. Can you name a single politician? Canadian
Uh,
politician.
Justin Trudeau.
Okay, so he is still prime minister
Right. Okay,
until
that's
they
what I
have
thought.
a leadership race. They're having a leadership race right now.
Oh,
But
okay.
until then, he's still prime minister. So whoever wins the leadership race will become prime minister.
Got it. Got it.
Because we
Okay.
don't elect in the head of state here. Well, technically speaking, the head of the state is the king. Uh, Constitutional monarchy. The head of
Mm,
state is still technically the king, but I think after recent developments, a lot of Canadians are pushing more and more towards let's just scrap that because apparently the royalty was saying, yeah, we don't really care about what United States is saying about annexing Canada.
yeah, that makes sense.
But there's a lot of us that are already like, we don't. Why? We don't need the king and queen on our money and like why?
Yeah, that makes
um,
I would agree. That makes sense.
yeah. So it's more, I think the major reason why it hasn't been done is it's a lot of work, and to try to get
Mm.
politicians to agree on the specifics is a lot of work.
That seems to be a common theme in all kinds of politics, no
Mhm,
matter where you live in the world, that
mhm,
getting stuff done in politics is a lot of work.
mhm. Okay, okay, just a couple more questions. Do you know
Oh
what a
boy.
poutine is?
I've heard of that term, but I don't know what it is.
Only the best food in the world.
Okay. I thought it was a food, but I don't
Mhm.
know what kind of food.
Fries with cheese and gravy, cheese
Oh, okay.
curds,
Yes. So we have that here, and in New Jersey, where I am, we call that disco fries.
disco fries.
That is a unique Jersey thing. That's not
Ah,
like a American thing. That's just
mhm.
where I live in my region. We have Jersey diners, and you get disco fries, which is exactly that.
Okay.
Yep.
And let's see. What is another fair-ish question to ask?
Mm.
Hmm. I usually have like a whole list, but then it's like, okay, it's morning and my brain is still foggy. So uh let's see. Well, do you know how about instead of asking you what the freezing and boiling point of water is in Celsius?
I know it's 0 degrees. Is 32 degrees. That's freezing.
Okay, freezing. Then what would boiling be? If 0 is freezing,
Yeah,
boiling
I
is the
don't
most
know.
logical number you could imagine.
100.
Yes.
Yeah. Look at me go. See, I'm
But
doing it.
where is Celsius and Fahrenheit the same? There's actually a number where they're the same because it's a weird, it's not like a direct conversion. It's
62 degrees.
gotta go cold.
Oh, like I don't know, 10 degrees, 32 degrees? No idea.
Like cold.
Like negative something?
Yeah. Even for Canadian talk cold.
Like negative 20?
A little bit more.
Negative 30.
40.
-40 is the same, huh?
Yeah, -40. It's the same Fahrenheit as Celsius.
I couldn't imagine anywhere being -40 personally, but that's just me.
I've been in -30.
Mm. The coldest I've ever been in, I was on the Arctic Circle in Finland for a month.
Mhm,
Maybe like a couple miles or a couple kilometers south of it. So we were really close. And it was pretty cold. I'm not sure how cold it got, but it was definitely in the negatives. And it was
mhm,
pretty frigid.
mhm. Okay, it's done. You're off the hook. You got a
Oh,
couple
thank God.
right. You got a couple right, so you're not
Good.
tied for the worst.
I'm
Because the
not
worst
tied for the
is
worst.
there are plenty of people who come on here that get none. None. Not even guess.
Oh, thank heavens I survived.
Okay, so I came across your channel. As people
Mm.
in the sandbox know, I do a lot of research for a TYT video I'm working on. And I came across your channel when I saw your breakdown of the conversation between Jank and Charlie at Amfest.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
And I thought that was a super interesting breakdown from your perspective because a lot of the people in my personal circle online tend to lean more towards non-religious. Like I wouldn't say atheist per se because
Yeah.
I wouldn't call myself an atheist, but I don't identify with any religion or religion institute. And my religion isn't centered around a singular God or a creator. But I
Mm.
do have like a deep spiritual belief and things of that sort. Um, but Christianism is very prominent in both the United States and Canada, and it seems to be getting stronger, but not necessarily in the good way that we would imagine Christianity is supposed to be.
Yeah.
And like here in Canada, we have Jamel Javani, who's besties with JD Vance, and Jamel Javani released a Christmas video saying how Christians were under attack by the government, and he's doing this as like, I understand I'm doing this in front of a Christmas tree in Parliament, but we're still under attack. And of course, a lot of these people feel like they're under attack because we're like, queer people exist.
That's
And
right. That's right. And we
yeah.
and other people don't celebrate Christmas all the time. So
Hmm.
you might hear someone say happy holidays.
Yeah.
Woe is you.
Yeah. The most offensive thing
Yes. So
possible.
offensive. It's crazy. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine a world where not everyone celebrates the same religious holiday that you celebrate? It's unfathomable, I know, but it's true. It
Mm-hmm.
happens.
Like I celebrate Christmas, but not for any religious sake.
No, Sandy. No.
It was
I
the
gotta go. End the
yeah,
stream. I'm
yeah.
off.
It was for the commercial sake of it. Just it's like I do find a lot of function in religion, especially like holidays and stuff, and bringing community together, functions to have, ceremonies, routine, but reasons for people to kind of be brought together in some sort of fashion. And I very much understand that to be that. And as a kid, my family life, not that great, as in pretty bad. But one holiday they were able to pull off was Christmas. Used to be a fairly decent holiday. So that one was kind of near and dear to my heart for a while, but in the past few years, not so much because of, well, reasons. Um, anyway, I get rambly. That's the joy of being a live streamer with ADHD.
I solidarity. I totally understand. I'm live Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, and so I
Mhm.
totally get it.
Yeah. So yeah, Christian nationalism is on the rise, and along with that is a lot of anti-LGBTQ plus rhetoric, a lot of anti-choice rhetoric, and it's not just okay. I don't believe in abortion, so I'm not going to have abortion or something like that. It's like, no, we need to enforce these values on everyone else. And there's a slight difference in our countries and how they were created because in the States it was originally meant to be a more agnostic nation. People from all different backgrounds could unite, whereas Canada was kind of built on Christian fundamentalism, uh, like white nationalism and stuff. Like it was specifically stated in a lot of things.
Mm.
And, throughout our history, there's been a bad experience with the Catholic Church in particular, with residential schools and what they did. So they've religion has always had a very prominent role in the creation of Canada and Canada as a whole. But we do have our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is actually fairly decent because it changes. It's like our Constitution in a way. It changes and it adapts to modern times. So, like our Supreme Courts and stuff like that, generally speaking, ruled the correct way to protect rights. But then we have conservative politicians that like to circumvent that any way they can. So when I talk about conservatives here in Canada, basically the same as your Republicans
Hmm.
with all the ideology and everything. If I say liberals here in Canada, mainstream Democrats, establishment Democrats, the NDP would be the squad.
Okay.
There's a lot of
Got it.
similarities there. So why don't you just start by kind of giving your thoughts on the conversation between Cenk and Charlie and just how this Christian nationalism is playing a part in today's politics with Trump?
Oh, sure.
Very
Since we're on,
basic question.
yeah, no, I'd be happy to talk about this. Let me just be clear for your audience, which by the way, audience, thanks for listening and listening to me talk about this. I go to America Fest every year. I've been to Turning Point USA's America Fest for 3 years in a row. I've met Charlie Kirk and I do content on it. I have an hour-long recap from my time there 2 years ago. Our next recap from this past year is coming out in a few days. This is what I do for a living at this point. Is I really track a lot of the Christian nationalism and what now is the far right and what they're doing. So I sat in the room when Cenk and Charlie had this conversation. And I will say that I am definitely I was telling you this, Sandy, before we went live. I'm pretty outside of like the main stream progressive commentator YouTube bubble. Like my world is a little bit different. We definitely overlap, but I'm not known by a lot of the creators there, right? And so I've watched the Young Turks from afar. I've seen some stuff blow up on Twitter, not knowing all the context. But I've gotten the vibe. Like Jank and I think Anna have both kind of been like on the fritz with their base and their audience for a lot of reasons. I think most of them are all legitimate, by the way. So I'm sitting here listening to Cenk and Charlie, and I'm thinking in my head about that viral clip that went crazy on YouTube a few years ago when Cenk is in the audience egging on Charlie Kirk at some debate, and Charlie like loses his shit and is like, "I'm a capitalist every day, Cenk. Are you?" They go at it. I'm like, "Whoa, these guys have bad blood." And now I'm watching Cenk on stage at America Fest trying to like shake hands in a lot of ways, right? While saying we have differences, but we have to agree on stuff. And one of his examples was when Charlie says that I think it's BlackRock or Blackwater, one of the big investment firms that's
Mm.
sucking up um, um, housing in the US should be like either regulated or it shouldn't happen anymore, right? And then they both applaud. And as I'm listening to this, I'm thinking to myself, I'm not sure if Cenk understands that Charlie Kirk and the world that he comes from are not interested in working together with their political opponents. They are interested in taking over and demolishing their opponents and ruling over them for as long as they're able to maintain power. And as I'm watching this, I'm like, I'm not even sure if Cenk knows about like the theological paradigms, the Christian theology that Charlie inhales, along with many others at that event, that tell them that God has given them a right to take over America and rule from the top down. And by the way, there's data behind all of this. So one of the leading research firms on Christian nationalism is PRRI. They study this stuff every year. They're one of the leading places. They'll tell you that Christian nationalists and nationalism is associated with less belief in pluralism. They don't believe in democratic ideals, and they don't believe in working together with their political opponents. They believe in conquering them. And so it was really interesting watching that conversation and thinking, I understand what Cenk is trying to do. I'm a pragmatist as well. I want to make it work. I want to work together. I don't believe in violence. We have people that see things differently. We got to find a way to push things forward together. I understand that and I agree with that sentiment. But doing it with Charlie Kirk is not the person you're going to find common ground with. He might make you think you guys have found common ground, but he's only doing that so he can take over and demolish you. And so that was, my big picture thoughts on the conversation was, again, I get what he's trying to do, but I don't really know if he understands the theology that animates this entire world of the far right now.
Mhm.
And there's a lot that we can go under, and I can give receipts for all of this. But this is, make no mistake, this is a modern Christian crusader movement that
Mhm.
believes in taking over the country and ruling from the top down. It looks very patriarchal. Quote unquote, gender norms are enforced. Atheists are put in prison. That's quotes from these people who believe in this movement. It's a very scary world. You know,
Mhm.
the 19th Amendment, which in the states is the right for women to vote, that's repealed under Christian nationalism. It's a really scary world, and they believe that they have a God given right to do it. I just don't know if Cenk is really fully aware, or if he is, I'm not sure if he really believes that the threat is that serious.
Mhm. You see, I've always believed in reaching out to people that you feel comfortable reaching out to on the other side. Like, if I have a family member or a neighbor that's maybe a little bit more right wing, I can try talking to them and eventually move them over. And I've done that with some of my family members. But, when it comes to somebody like Charlie Kirk, he has said in not so subtle language that he wants people like me gone from existence. And so, exactly how does that happen? Type thing. And so, I tend to believe the words he says when he says these horrible things. And I'm just like, how do you work with somebody that doesn't believe that I, as a person, actually exist? That the idea of being non binary isn't legitimate in his eyes to even begin with. How do you even begin to have that conversation?
That's
And
right.
so there's places where you can, I think, try reaching out and talking to people on the right, but I- you know, I didn't quite take the religious aspect into account with Charlie Kirk because I was worried about him and all this sort of stuff. But the way that you explain it makes it even scarier because it's not just he's a bigoted, hateful person and he has his own agenda on that he's trying to play out, but he has like this calling from a god to implement this way of life, which to me is very dangerous.
That's right. And look, let me, because I really love giving receipts. I
Mhm.
don't. I'm sure, like you, Sandy, right? You don't want to sound hyperbolic. You don't want to sound like a right wing talk radio host where the world's always falling all the time, just to scare people into doing what you want them to do. Right? That's not how we operate. I'm not here to scare people unjustifiably. I'm not here to try and get people to follow me so that way they fall underneath my influence. So I can sell them more books. I don't even have a book yet, right? Like that isn't my point. So I like having receipts. I like being able to demonstrate that what I'm saying is not an exaggeration. So to your point, first off, yes, I think you're absolutely right. I have friends of mine I talk to behind the scenes.
Oh,
Some of them are
you're
even
breaking up just a little bit. The audio was still there, but
hmm,
the
really
camera is breaking up just a little bit.
interesting. Okay, am I better now? Let's take a look.
Well, you look a bit fuzzy, but
Huh, okay, I'm hardwired in. I can check my
yeah.
connection, but I'll take a
Okay,
look.
you're in focus now.
Huh, weird. Okay. Well, we'll just call that we'll call that demonic influence or something. I don't know. But
It's it's
to
it's the Canada tariff being implemented right now between
yeah, that must be
Wi-Fi.
it. so so to yeah, I mean, look, I agree with you. I'm all about trying to talk to people on the other side and have the good faith conversation. But for that to happen, you need to be talking to a good faith person. And I know some of them. I definitely know some people who are good faith. Now, Charlie Kirk. Let's talk about this. First off, let's go back to their big event, America Fest. What most people don't know because people don't cover it is that at America Fest every year is an all church worship night on Saturday night. So what they do is they dedicate Saturday night in the main hall where 20,000 people show up to a night of singing songs to Jesus and different pastors that come out giving a theological or a Christian underpinning to all of the rhetoric that they're hearing all day. Okay. One of the people who spoke at this past America Fest, his name is Lance Wallnow. Lance Wallnow comes from the charismatic slice of the mainstream evangelical Christian world. So he believes in speaking in tongues. He believes in the laying hands of other people to heal them. He believes in something called prophecy, where you hear from God and give a prediction of what's to happen. Lance Wallnow popularized this theory called the Seven Mountain Mandate. Okay. And what it says essentially is that Christians, mainly, you know, conservative Christians like Lance, have a calling by God to take over and dominate the seven spheres of influence: family, religion, education, media, arts, entertainment, business, and government. Okay. So he teaches this. I mean, there's books, there's teachings. He's very popular in this world. Charlie Kirk in 2020, when Trump was running again, said, or sorry, when Trump was running again, said, finally we have a president that understands the seven mountains of cultural influence. Okay.
I understand what
So
Charlie is saying, but I don't think Trump would understand that.
he definitely wouldn't, but that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And this is why I tell people that for me, Trump is dangerous, sure. But what's more dangerous are the people behind him because Trump is a deal maker in his mind, right? You give, you get. So you put me in power, I'll give you what you want. So for people like Charlie, they're drawing directly on this belief that, hey, we have an obligation, right, to take over the seven mountains of influence. And Lance Wallnow is the person behind this. Lance spoke at Turning Point's America Fest this past year at the on the main stage that Saturday night during the all church worship night. So there's a total theology to this. Charlie Kirk's pastor Rob McCoy, very close to Charlie, speaks at all of his events next to him. They have a Turning Point USA has a wing called Turning Point Faith. They have an entire another nonprofit dedicated to reaching the mainly white evangelical church in America and pushing this stuff to radicalize churches to fight on the front lines in their mind for their faith. They host pastor summits. They do all this. So this is very much a religious zealotry that is fueling so much of the politics that a lot of people, including yourself, are going to cover as we walk into the next 4 years under this administration.
Yeah. Oh. You see, part of the reason why I get worried in my own personal experience, like when religion is being brought into this so much. I grew up in a very Christian area, city. So my family, my stepfather was Catholic, I think. Um, but I grew up around a lot of people that went to church regularly. They would bring me along to some of their youth camps and things of that sort. And a lot of it was, people who espoused to be very, godly and inclusive. They were the most judgmental people I ever come across. Like
Yeah.
sitting down um, a photography workshop, and one of the women there just uh, talking shit about people like, oh, if they have tattoos, then they're unholy and things of that sort. And meanwhile, I'm sitting there and I have tattoos. Like there's this absolute you must conform or else. And the thing that always really bothered me about it is, again, it's not so much about what you choose to do with your life and your body is up to you, but what gives you that right to impose that on other people, especially other people who don't believe in in this God that they believe in as well.
Right. I
And
can answer that
okay.
if you want me to. I didn't want to cut you off, but I can definitely give you an answer to that question.
Well, I was just, do they understand that other people don't believe, like, that there could be a different possibility, that there's people, a lot of people in this world that don't believe in a singular God. And that belief is just as legitimate as their beliefs.
Well, they understand the first half of that.
Mhm.
Yes, other people see the world differently. No, they are not as legitimate as my beliefs. So when you grow up in this world, and to be clear, it's not the term Christianity is too broad. Christianity is a huge house. There's tons of rooms inside the house, all different traditions and beliefs exist inside that room. Like any major world religion, right? We're talking about what I call is the basement of Christianity, the fundamentalism, or
Mhm.
the side of Christianity that says we have an exclusive truth revealed to us by God that no one else has. And therefore, we have an obligation to convert our neighbors to this belief. And that's the key, right? Many Christians who are conservative evangelicals would tell you, yeah, we understand that people are Muslim or people are more agnostic or just spiritual, but they're all under a lie. They don't actually have the truth like how we have it. See, we have the Bible, and the Bible is God's word. And so all we have to do is convince people that this is God's word too, convert them to our understanding to be part of the true faith that gives them a basis for true morality and what they would call as true human flourishing. Now, of course, what's actually happening is it's dogma. It's dogma. So, for a very easy example, is we know that, and studies show this. Studies show that if a queer person goes to a church that is not affirming of who they are as a person, their likelihood or their chance of depression or even unaliving ideation actually goes up over time. That's data. That's research. However, Christians who would not believe that will say, well, that's flying in the face of what God's word clearly says. And if these people just conform to what God's word clearly says around sexual identity, they're going to actually be a lot better off. Even though we know that studies say the opposite, right? Because for them, dogma is more important than any kind of research or data. So they believe in conforming everyone, the entire world, into a very narrow sect of Christianity and a very narrow set of beliefs that they think will promote human flourishing, but in many cases actually harm their neighbors.
Mhm. So how do you break away from that? Because like I've seen some of your content now, so I know you've kind of broken away from that. Um oh, there was a question in my head. ADHD is such a breeze when you're trying to do like these big conversations type
I
thing.
know, I know. We can go
Um
so many different directions, you know?
yeah, cuz it's this idea of like if we're all made in God's image and I'm queer, then wouldn't that mean that that's how the God made me, you know?
Right,
Um
right,
So I've never quite understood like, no, no, he makes you, but he made you in this way only. But that's not who I am. Like that's just fundamentally not
right.
who I am.
And they would tell you that no, you're just choosing that. That's what they
Mm,
would say, which is not a good answer, by the way. I
mm,
mean, but it's an answer. It's just not a good one. They would say that people who are non-binary or who
mhm,
are whatever, queer, that they're just choosing that lifestyle. I'm sure you've heard that
mhm,
term a lot. They're just choosing a lifestyle. So once again, it completely erases your lived experience. It erases your words. It erases who you are as a human and who you're telling people that you are, and it says, no, get rid of that. And here's the dogma that you have to now believe for you to be accepted by God and
mhm,
well, by us and therefore by God, right? So that's kind of how it works. And there's an
mhm.
answer for everything. They're just not very compelling answers.
Yeah, because again, in these, when I've been around very religious people, and it doesn't even really matter what religion, a lot of them, I'm a little bit uneasy about coming out as to who I really am.
Yeah.
About being non-binary, about being polyamorous, non-monogamous, type thing, not married, and all of this sort of stuff. But I've seen like I said, I've been watching your content, and you seem to embrace people with differences. You're very pro-trans rights, land back type issues as well. Um, how did you break away from this dogmatic that Christianism? I'm not saying that right.
Christianity.
Christianity. Dyslexia on top of ADHD can really throw people through a loop, especially when I'm tired. You should see me at the end of a 6-hour stream, and
I can only
the
imagine.
sandbox just has a hoot because I rely on them to read my mind as to the words I'm trying to say. So, how did you break away from that and become more like to start this organization?
Well, honestly, I just took my faith more seriously. That's my big gripe with these fundamentalists. They don't take the Christian tradition seriously enough, even the Bible seriously enough. I knew even when I was still more conservative and still in that bubble, I knew that there was a problem with how Christians targeted gay people, but never talked about greed because the Bible I read had way more passages around greed and how we treated poor people than it did around so-called quote unquote homosexuality. And so I knew even back then, I'm like, I don't know, guys, like if we're taking the Bible at face value, which by the way we should never do, we should always interpret it. But in this world, if we're going to take it at face value, in First Corinthians chapter 5, the Apostle Paul says that we're called to judge the church and not the world. And it seems like a lot of you are all about judging the world and not the church. So, a lot of my curiosity just started. It led me to a place where I was asking more and more questions, and it's not that I didn't have answers. I was just less and less satisfied with the answers I was getting from this world, right?
Mhm,
I don't get it, guys. If we live in a free country, why can't my gay neighbor get married? Well, because God said so. Like, really? Where? Well, it's in the Bible. Well, you know that my gay neighbor doesn't believe in the Bible, right? And that we live in a secular society ruled by a constitution. Like, they should have the right to get married, despite what you might think about their moral choice or not. No, God's word says so. That's not a good enough answer. Like, I need a better answer for why this is not a plausible scenario for friends of mine who are human, flourishing, fully functioning adults giving back to society. Like, why don't they have the same rights? So there were always little cracks in the foundation and in questions I was getting. But I would say for sure, 2016, Trump was the moment where that dam just broke wide open. And I'll tell you why. This was when I really went, something is really wrong here. So in the Christian tradition I grew up in, there's a term called purity culture. All right. And what this is, it's the belief, and you're taught this at a very young age. Speaking of sexualizing children, by the way, right? Imagine being 11 or 12 and being taught that you have to save yourself for marriage. I mean, this world is intense. They do purity culture balls where dads will take their daughters to purity dances and make them sign virginity cards. Like, it's an intense world. A lot of women are taught very early that, like, even showing a shoulder can cause someone in their church, a man, to stumble after them. So there's this whole world that you grew up in of like, sex is sacred. Don't have sex until you're married. Don't masturbate. Don't ever watch pornography. It's going to destroy your life. And there's always analogies that you're given as a teenager. Hey, if I have this gum and I chew it and I give it to you, do you want that? No, of course not. That's gross. Then why are you going to sleep with someone else who's not your partner? It's like chewing gum. These are some of the analogies that you're told
Mhm.
very early on. And you're also taught that God really cannot use people who are sexually immoral. Like, at church, you can volunteer for different roles. You can be, in my case, I was a drummer. So I drummed in the church as a volunteer. Well, if I had a girlfriend and I was caught being alone with her for too long, that looked really bad. And, we can't have people on the stage who are doing things that look suspicious. It's not a good example of leadership, right? So you're taught this forever. You're taught this for years of your life, that don't do these things. God does not use the sexually immoral. You're not a good person, etc. And by the way, to be clear, me and my wife, now of almost 9 years, we did that. We saved ourselves for marriage. In fact, this is a true story. My first kiss ever, I was 17. I was so worked up after I kissed my then girlfriend, I threw up afterwards. I was so full of anxiety. I literally threw up in the bushes because I was so worked up. That's how ingrained this stuff is in your mind. So, color me shocked when Donald Trump comes on the scene and the leaked Hollywood Access tape comes out of him bragging about sexually assaulting a woman. And then the pastors and faith leaders that raised me on this purity culture shit are telling me that, no, no, we need a commander in chief, not a pastor in chief. This is just locker room talk. I'm like, but wait, hold on. Trump is on his third marriage. He cheated on his then pregnant wife with an adult film star. He's on the cover of Playboy magazine and he's bragging about grabbing women. And you're telling me that God can use this guy? But I couldn't even serve as a drummer on your stage in front of 40 people because I was alone with my girlfriend for too long and we didn't even do anything? Are you for real right now? I was like, my flabbers were gasted. I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. What is happening? And so that was the real beginning of me saying, wait, is this sexual moral stuff an objective truth that matters for all humans? Or are you just picking and choosing when to enforce it? Because Trump is the antithesis of everything I was taught to be as a man in those church spaces. I was taught to be a man of integrity. Trump is not. I was taught to respect women. Trump does not. I was taught not to be greedy. Trump is greedy. Like, everything that Trump is everything I was taught not to be. So that was really the beginning of me saying something is way wrong. And then we see Black
Mhm.
Lives Matter and we see COVID. And I go, okay, again, we're on the wrong side of these issues. All these moments, these three cultural moments that blew the lid open for me and so many others, really made us rethink what it meant to be a Christian. That's the short
Mhm.
story of it.
Yeah, because like talking about purity culture and stuff like that, I find it very funny that here we have like the purity culture of Christians, yet a lot of people on the right will accuse the left of being purity testing in order to be part of the left. Like, oh no, you don't believe in all these things, then you're not part of the left. Oh no, and you're apparently a Nazi. Oh, sorry, that's a dig at a certain somebody. Like this idea of like the left um won't embrace people, but the right will, with like these very strong purity things. But I think part of it is there's this illusion of accepting people who don't 100% agree with who they are. Like there are people that are queer, let's say, or gay, that will become part of this right-wing
Mm-hmm.
evangelical party, thinking, I don't know, like, do they even understand that they're never going to be accepted? Like, they're being used, yet on the left, if you're embraced, it's because we authentically do include you, embrace you, want to support you and stuff, but I don't get that same feeling from the right.
Yeah, it's an interesting, and I'm going to be honest. I'm kind of talking a little bit out of my expertise here.
Mhm.
I've just seen a few things, and even like the term like the left and the right. I can give a good example of who the right is. I can name all these different organizations of like who makes up the common right these days. The left though seems a lot more fragmented and not nearly as like unified. I mean, there is no Turning Point USA of the
Mhm.
left, as far as I'm aware, doing $80 million a year in funding, pushing out all these different left wing influencers, right? But I would say that I've noticed, and there are a few people that I see in right wing spaces where I'm like, dude, you know that if these people get their way, you're the first to go, right? Like you are literally the first to go. There's an atheist in those spaces named James Lindsay, and he's an hardcore atheist, but he gets invited to speak at like these pastor summits and these like Turning Point USA events. And I keep trying to tell him, like, dude, if these guys get what they want, you're gone. Like atheism, and this is an actual quote from a guy who wrote a book called The Case for Christian Nationalism. Atheism is crushed. The atheist is thrown in jail. I'm all for blasphemy laws. That's what this author said. His name's Stephen Wolf. And I keep trying to tell people, like, like for example, gays against groomers, right? They go to Turning Point USA events. I talk to them. In my mind, I'm like, you know that you're the first to go if they get everything they want. They want to overturn a Obergefell. That has nothing to do with trans people and everything to do with gay people having the right to marry in America. They want that overturned. What are you doing here?
Mhm.
So it is interesting watching some people seem to be okay with being a part of a movement that is clearly against their own interests and say, yeah, we're really fighting the woke. It's like, yeah, but you're chopping off your feet to do it. Makes no
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah, because I think when it comes to the left area I'm more familiar with, there is both truth and non-truth to a lot of what's said about people on the left. Yes, it is a lot more fragmented, but it is also a lot more inclusive of who people are and things of that sort. And I'm worried that people who are maybe outside of the left, but kind of want to inch over there, get scared away by a lot of the rhetoric that comes from people who are in the center and the center right about what the left is. So, as would you now kind of identify yourself as being, you know, other than being on the left, like I'm not talking about progressive socialist, communist, or anything, but just of the left, would you now kind of identify being on that side of the spectrum?
I would, and maybe I can ask you this question. I'll be honest with you, just being transparent. And this could be the nature of the internet too.
Hmm.
So this could be an internet thing. But there are times where I see some stuff happening in more left spaces where I'm like, I don't want to be the target of that. Like,
Hmm.
I do not want to be that white bro who says one wrong thing the wrong way. And it's just like, how could you? You hate women. You hate. And I was like, whoa, I didn't mean any of that. Here's what I said. That's happened to me a few times in my own like evangelical progressive space I've existed in. And there are times where I do feel like sometimes and again, this is a feeling. I'm
Hmm.
not saying it's true. I'm just saying how I feel. Sometimes I get the feeling of there are these like purity tests, not of like values, but of how we get those values accomplished, right? So like if I say, hey, I think we should do healthcare this way, right? I feel like sometimes for some people that might be no. That's how could you possibly say you want it done that way? The only right way is this way. And I'm like, well, I agree. We have to reform healthcare, but because we disagree on like the approach, that's a problem for you.
Hmm.
I get that sense sometimes with things I see online in more left-leaning spaces, frankly.
So we do run into this problem, I think every group does, where there are people who are of the left, but are reactionaries and not really authentic.
Hmm.
And so a lot of these things like and then there's a lot of people who will be like, "Oh my god, I was piled on by people simply saying, 'Can you explain this? Like I don't understand this. I don't agree with you here.'" But then all of a sudden it's like, "No, no, I'm being attacked because they don't agree
Hmm.
with me." So there's a lot of over exaggeration, but there are times where there can be a lot of pushback on one specific thing. But for the most part, that is to me an exaggeration. Because I know I feel confident enough in my space that I've created here that if I say something that is not appropriate or insensitive, that the people who are around me will just kind of say to me, you know, that was a bit off and explain to me why. It's not suddenly I'm banned from the left or I'm not a leftist. Um, and I feel that a lot of people are, because of this rhetoric, this talk about leftists being so unreasonable, that they're afraid to actually talk and ask the questions that need to be asked. And to me, that's very unfortunate because, some people who claim to be the biggest victims of the left, all I see are people on the left who are like, I tried talking to them like reasonably without, pushback privately, publicly, but there's just like, oh no, we're not going to take it.
Well,
Like they,
question for you
hmm? Yeah.
about this.
Mhm.
Let's go back to your analogy. Let's say you say something and someone in your comments hits you up and says, "Hey, Sandy, I think that what you said is insensitive." What if you pushed back and said, "Sorry, I disagree. I'm not gonna apologize for that."
Mm,
Would you then be seen as like, "Oh, well, now Sandy's unaccountable. Sandy didn't listen. Sandy didn't actually acknowledge the harm that she caused
mhm,
because you just couldn't see it and disagreed with the premise to begin with." I think that's more what I'm referring to. There's been
mhm,
a few times where I've seen this happen where like someone's like, "Hey, that offended me." And the person's like, "Hey, wasn't my intent. Sorry, but like it was a benign comment." And that person's like, "No, you're not hearing me." And by
mm,
hearing, what I mean is you didn't acknowledge that I'm right and you're wrong. And until you do, I'm going to keep pushing for you to do that. And if you don't, I'm going to start calling you problematic.
mhm.
That I have seen a few times. I'm just kind of curious, like how you as someone more in this space would view that kind of scenario.
Well, for me, it's like I can explain where I'm coming from. And what I hope is that people can at least understand that and we can agree to disagree. If there are people that are like, oh no, you don't agree with me whatsoever, therefore you're this and that and the other thing, that's more of a them problem.
Hmm.
Like there's something in them that demands, again, this conformity that doesn't necessarily add up because you know, and I'm open to having those conversations. Like, I think that's the thing where people kind of get afraid of. If somebody doesn't agree with me, I'm open to having that conversation. And hopefully at the end of it, they can at least see where I'm coming from and
Right.
have that, okay, I don't agree with you. I think you're wrong in this area, but I can at least understand that you're being authentic, that you're being, you're coming from a sincere place.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And that's
I was
what
just
I
curious
hope
your thoughts.
for. But for the people who suddenly be like, oh no, you don't agree with me 100%, therefore you're wrong, that's a them problem.
Right.
And I can try my best to reach out to them, but in the end, if they don't, there's only so much I can do. Because
Yeah.
this is why I like to actually embrace lots of people from lots of different backgrounds in the left, because me as a non-binary queer person who presents female, there are simply people I will never be able to reach. They will
Mm.
just never listen to me. And so I like bringing in all sorts of people to reach those different groups of people who maybe resonate with them more, can come from a background of like, I understand where these other people are coming from, so I can speak to this. Um, but since, especially once you hop online, a lot
Right.
of that gets skewed. So
Yeah.
online, it's
Yeah.
very right wing dominated, centrist. Like the left on the online is the center, you know. Um,
For sure. I mean, Elon
mm,
Musk bought Twitter
yeah.
to make it 4chan 2.0. Like that's what's going on here. It's
Mhm.
unbelievable.
So I do get worried when people hop online looking for alternatives, let's say to the center and the right. They aren't met with anything sincerely. And so what I'm wondering is how do you help bring people who are, let's say, a little bit more religious into a more leftist space? Because I also know that a lot of us who have platforms tend to not be, again, very religious. As I say, I'm very, very spiritual. I can go on for a long time about my belief system, and this is why I never judge people for their own belief systems, because if I just say it at face value, it sounds a little off, you know. And I can understand
Yeah.
that. I totally understand that people will not believe what I believe. So how do we kind of bring people more to the left who might be religious, who are hesitant because of what they see online?
I mean, that's a question I think for you and that world to talk about, because it's interesting. The space I exist in is an ex-evangelical, that's the actual term, or like a deconstruction space. It's also very progressive, and that also understands Christian nationalism. That is very different than like, and I'm not sure how left you think someone like I don't know, David Pakman or Luke Beasley is, some of like the people with like 2 million plus subs. But someone like that, their world is coming from the progressive political lens and maybe is very low on the religious side, right? And what one of my critiques, and I don't have many honestly of like more left-wing commentator spaces, but one of my critiques of mainstream media and the left-wing space is that they're not talking about the theology and the Christianity that is underpinning so much of what's happening. Like they just
Mhm.
aren't. And when you don't do that, you don't fully get why this is such a five alarm fire. It's not just the fact that fascism and authoritarianism is here. That's a five alarm fire. But you have a religious zealotry that is the foundational, the cornerstone to all of this. And if you don't understand that, your audience is never going to fully get why this is happening, right? And so I think that there's a lot of people now, especially because a lot of people have kind of left the church and maybe are Christian or are more spiritual now, but still find Jesus really compelling for whatever reason. I think that there are a lot of people out there who are looking for commentators that can kind of speak the both languages of like, hey, we're actually very progressive. We believe in loving our immigrant and loving our trans neighbor and fighting for their rights to exist, right? And also let us help you understand the Christianity that we're actually pushing back against in favor of a better path forward in our faith. I would love to see more commentators inviting people on or just having even the behind the scenes conversation. I don't care about platform. I really don't. I don't care if I go on their show or they come on mine publicly. I will meet with people behind the scenes all day just to think about how do we strategize to combat the fire hose of misinformation coming from right-wing media systems. And as you know, just like me, right? The right wing media ecosystem is funded by billionaires. They have a lot of money and they've done a really good job, a really effective job over the past decade, building out some really good social media networks and systems. And they know how to use the algorithm. They know how to go viral. They know how to clickbait people really well. And I just don't see that same kind of firepower coming out of the left for a lot of reasons. And that possibly is because we don't like billionaires too, which I totally get. But we have to start working together and think
Mhm.
about how do we create a more compelling vision for people that is welcoming of Christians and non-Christians, and that makes room. Because I think that the big thing we have to realize is that we can share
Sorry,
the
you're breaking
same.
up again.
Hi,
Hi. The screen is frozen. I think I just heard you.
your screen is frozen on my end.
Oh, well, you're frozen on my
Weird.
end.
Oh my gosh. Let me check. I want to check my connection, make sure I'm
Uh,
solid here. I never really had
okay.
this issue. Let me take a look.
You're,
Um,
I don't know. Maybe it's the whole Canada US situation
it could
right
be.
now.
Am I back now or am I all right?
You're coming back now, yeah.
So strange. Sorry about that. All I was going to say is that
Mhm.
we can share the same values and have different beliefs.
Mhm.
And I think that is the strongest, thing going for people in left wing spaces, right? We can find same common core values while having different beliefs that get us there.
Mhm. Yeah, because I do see, like, I do believe that, and I do believe that we need to have more conversations on how to build leftist solidarity. Because, as I said, I do kind of feel what the rhetoric is exaggerated, but there is truth to it. That there is fragmentation, that there is sometimes unwarranted pushback on the left. And so I want to try to build that leftist solidarity as much as possible, especially, bringing in that religious aspect because when there's that aspect in the right wing that is taking over both the United States and here in Canada, if we don't acknowledge it, how are we supposed to deal with it?
That's right.
Because here in Canada, we have a whole host of right wing politicians that are based in religion. So we have a member of parliament, an MP, Jamel Javani, best friends with J.D. Vance, was at his wedding, gave a bit of a sermon at his wedding. Um, and they want to try to bring in and enforce this fundamentalism, anti-LGBTQ plus, against a person choosing what happens to their body and really being more and more restrictive. And I'm worried that if we don't address the religious aspect to it, we're not going to be able to push back against it in any meaningful way. And so there's a question in my head. Oh my God, I just had some stuff in my head. The choice of live streaming.
Well, can I just say one thing?
Mhm,
And this might to your audience, I'm just asking you to hear me out for a minute.
mhm,
One of my friends, Jim Wallace, a real legend in like the progressive Christian space, says that the answer to bad religion is not no religion, it's better religion. Now, hear me out. What I'm not saying is that everyone has to convert to my religion. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying though is that if you're gonna, we have to be honest about the reality. Most people are spiritual. A third of Americans, at least or more, identify as Christian. They're not going to go for just leaving faith behind completely. They want many a better alternative to how do I maintain my roots, my faith, but also advocate for my neighbor, right? Essentially, what he's saying is we shouldn't have to choose between loving God or loving our neighbor. And I do think that if we're going to really make a dent, especially in the Christian nationalism world, you don't fight it effectively by offering just a secular notion of everything. You just don't. You have to be able to offer people on an individual level, hey, we're not asking you to leave your faith. We're asking you to find a better path forward in your faith. We're asking you to take the teachings of Jesus more seriously than you took them before. We're asking you to understand the Bible on a deeper level than you did before. And the other thing, too, I'll say is that in American history, there is a very long tradition, both in the Black church and even in the white church, of Christians who were advocating for social change, social justice, doing a lot of good work. The founder of the Salvation Army, all right, she was a staunch feminist. And she was such a feminist that she wouldn't marry her husband until he embraced all of her feminist ideals. This is the 19th century. That's the founder of the Salvation Army. So there is definitely a tradition of Christians and other people of faith fighting for the common good in a progressive, social justice oriented way. And I think it's both and. Sandy, I would never, ever expect you or want you to leave behind your spirituality or how you view the world religiously and become a Christian like me, right? But I know that there are a lot of people like you who need to feel seen in leftist spaces. And there are a lot of people like me who want to also feel seen and welcome in those spaces while not giving up their allegiance to Jesus or whatever it might be. Does that make sense?
oh yeah, absolutely. Like I would, if believing in a religion, like if that's part of who you are and it fulfills you in a way, and it's just, that's again, like I said, like it's just a core element of who you are. I don't want to just tell people you can't be that.
Exactly.
I don't, I
Exactly.
want to be able to embrace people of all sorts of backgrounds and have them feel welcome. And if that includes religion, then that includes religion. Like I would never tell people you can't believe this way.
Right.
And
Right.
so, like, I'm worried that, again, there are some leftists that I do know of that are actually like, oh, no, religion is absolutely stupid. And if you believe that, you're stupid and all that. And
Right.
I put the brakes on that because, like I said, the way that I believe can be seen as very far out there to some people, but it's just, it's part of who I am. Like, it's a fundamental part of where I believe. But to me, faith is believing in something that can't be proven.
Yes. I have met those people online too who are like, "Pff, religion is so stupid. And it reminds me of my own tradition when I was taught that atheists have no moral foundation.
Mhm.
And I turned out that wasn't true. I think we have to keep in mind that, and let's just, for sake of argument, let's just use the Christian faith for example. 'Cause I'm a Christian. The Christian tradition is 2,000 years old and has galaxies inside of it of theologians, of people who think deeply about these things, all different ways of expressing this. I think it's a little disingenuous and ignorant just to say with one statement, all religion is stupid. It's obviously not stupid. Now, it can be used as a tool of liberation or a weapon of oppression. And right now in 2025 America, we're seeing a very militant strain of Christian thinking taking over our government and our ecosystems and pushing for a really harmful version of Christian thinking. But make no mistake, the reason why the civil rights happened, you can thank the Black Christian tradition for that. MLK was a staunch Christian. There's all kinds of Christians throughout history, including American history, that because of their faith, believed that they had an obligation to liberate the oppressed, to be part of the Underground Railroad, to fight for civil rights, for the working poor, for unions, right? For fairer wages. So I think we have to be a little more I don't want people becoming fundamentalists all over again. And you can do that
Mhm.
with anything. I think it's important just to realize that, like anything, religion's a complicated topic, and you're not going to give one blanket answer that will be accurate about any said religion in one statement. It's just impossible.
Mhm. Yeah. Uh, oh, so much to think about here. But yeah, because I know, like, personally, I've had bad encounters with Christianity, but to me, to then put a blanket statement on all Christians would just seem so wrong because I also know there's absolutely wonderful people that I've met who are Christian. And for people on the left, I would say, like, if you don't believe in putting a blanket statement on all queer people or all black people or all indigenous peoples and things of that sort, then why on earth would you put a blanket statement on people who are Christian?
Right. Right. And on the other side of that, Christians like me have an obligation to be very loud in honor of people like you, right? Because
Mhm.
I absolutely understand that because of my own tradition, white evangelicalism in the 80s, you get so much of the homophobia and hatred that we see now. I tell people all the time, there is no Trump without white Christians. That's just data. White Christians are solely responsible for getting Trump elected in 2016, 2020, and 2024. That's a data point. I'm a white man who's very cis and very straight, who's also a Christian. I have to own that shit, right? I have an obligation for the sake of my neighbors to say, whoa, like that's horrible. Whatever's going on here is bad. And I never fault ever, especially online. I never fault my queer neighbors for being so anti-Christian because I totally get it. I totally get it. During the Reagan era, it was Christians who were like, "Don't fund AIDS research because it's God's judgment on the gays." Christians said that shit, right? In the 90s, they were fighting against getting gay marriage accomplished. In the 2000s, it was the groomer agenda. It's white Christians and their ecosystems that create these boogeymen that affect people like you, Sandy, and affect my other neighbors who are trans and are just trying to survive in this country, right? And so I think it's a very valid feeling to be like, fuck Christianity. I'm like, I get it. I get it. And if you ever want to explore some of the other rooms that have actually led to liberation, I'm happy to do that. But that's not your obligation to try and be nuanced about it. Because right now you're facing the full weight of a Christo-fascist agenda that, in the words of Michael Knowles, wants to eradicate transgenderism. It's bullshit.
Mhm.
It's bullshit.
Okay, so to kind of start wrapping up here, in Canada specifically, like the Christian nationalism is on the rise, but it's still not prominent. Like we still have a lot of checks and balances here. So how do we stop it right now? Like how do we start pushing back now before it becomes like a massive problem? Because we have conservative premiers. So the premier is the head of the province who do find workarounds. And so there's things like uh, in some schools, pronouns can't be respected if the child doesn't feel safe coming out to the parents. And even though we're protected on a federal level with our charters of rights and freedoms, they find workarounds. And so, like for reproductive health clinics, they just don't fund them to the point that they have to close. So there was a province completely without any reproductive rights help. And I do like there's individual politicians that I see that are coming up in the ranks that are very worrisome and some that are already there. And there's a broad range because we have like one MPP here in Ontario who is very he is like you could take his picture and put him beside Christian nationalism and be like, no, I totally you didn't have to put that picture like that is he's the picture of it. And he's
Yeah.
very young, totally against reproductive rights. But
Mhm.
we also have other elements within the federal government. A certain politician I cover a lot of on this channel who is an absolute Zionist
Mm.
and wants to base policy on their beliefs. And I'm just, how do you like now is the time to really start pushing back against it, but how do you wake people up, especially in a country that is so politically illiterate right now. Like, we just had a provincial election here in Ontario that I'm still kind of devastated over.
Mm,
And 55% of the population didn't bother to come out and vote. Like,
mm.
like, it's not an easy question, and I think it's very layered, and it takes a lot more people. But how do you start getting people engaged when there's still a lot of time to do something about it? It's kind of like, how do we get people caring about climate change now as opposed to
Yeah.
when their
Yeah.
house is underwater?
Well, I think on the political level, I'm not sure how it works in Canada, but you have to start raising hell with whoever represents you, or whoever you can get a hold of in politics. Like who can you talk to and say, "Are you aware of this? Here's what's going on." I don't know. Again, at the local level, I'm not sure how it breaks down in Canada, but just even letting your local communities know and be aware of, hey, this is really a threat to all of us. Because one thing about Christian nationalism is that it actually hurts people that support it in most places, especially women, right? Because it's very patriarchal. It's very about gender norms. They don't want the human flourishing of all their neighbors. They want the human flourishing of some of their neighbors. I think that's part of it. I think the other part is how do people in other spaces be welcoming to people who might be on the fence or just ignorant, right? I mean, Sandy, you and I, we live in this world. We eat, live, and breathe this shit every day. Like we
Yeah.
know what's going on. It reminds me of when I used to work at Apple. I worked there for a couple of years. Whenever a new phone came out, and someone would come in, oh, there's a new phone out. I'm like, yeah, how do you not know? Well, because I live in the Apple bubble. Like I
Hmm.
knew about this for months, right? I followed all the news. Same kind of thing. So the question we have to ask ourselves as content creators is how do we be responsible with our platforms and invite people into a better way of being that promotes not just their neighbor's human flourishing, but their own human flourishing. Something I tell people often is that I want the children of my MAGA neighbor to have access to affordable education and quality healthcare. I want my MAGA neighbor, when they have a baby, to have paid family leave. I want their human flourishing too. I don't want them
Hmm.
to be forced to choose between mom and dad working in corporate America or going into massive amounts of debt. I want them to flourish as well. So how do we push for a society that makes all of us benefit, not just some? I think that's a really big question that we have to be answering. And I think that it's important, lastly, for us to be educated on Christian nationalism. There are a lot of great books by scholars that are very accessible. The Flag and the Cross by Samuel Perry and Andrew Whitehead. Oh my gosh, there's Bradley Onish's book that just came out. There's Kristen Dumais, Jesus and John Wayne. There are so many books that break down what's going on and how to understand this stuff. A few readings of that. Matthew Taylor's book, The Violent Take It by Force. Selfless plug. We have interviews with all those people on our podcast and on YouTube to make them accessible to the average person to understand what's going on. Be literate so that way you can pick up on the dog whistles. When someone says the mountains of influence, oh, that's a seven-mountain mandate. I know exactly what this person's talking about. That kind of stuff is important.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I'm totally the type of person that you can't deal with the problem unless you acknowledge where that problem is coming from and deal with the root of the issue.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing more and more the religious influence right now in the right wing and how that's really starting to ramp up. And yeah, I'm a little worried. I'm a little worried as somebody who's beyond the chopping block of that pretty quickly.
And I think it's a valid worry. I'm not here to say no,
Mhm,
it's over exaggerated. It's actually under exaggerated. There's someone
mhm,
named Doug Wilson who wants, before he dies in our Constitution in America, he wants Jesus Christ as Lord written into the Constitution. These people are deeply serious, and they unfortunately have a lot of money behind them. That was my concern with Pete Hegseth. That I mentioned to you offline. He's a big Doug Wilson fan. These people are very dangerous and they're getting power. So we should be worried, but that worry should motivate us to be the change that we want to see.
okay. Well, why don't you do more of that selfless plugging right now and let people know where to find you and stuff? I have all of your links, as many of the links that I could find anyway, in the description
Oh,
box
thank you.
below. But,
So kind.
let people know what you're up to and where they can find you.
Yeah, so anywhere that is the New Evangelicals on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, you can find me. I also co-host a new show underneath the New Evangelicals umbrella called the Tim and April Show that we go live on Mondays and Thursdays covering cultural issues from that Christian perspective that is much more liberative in nature. I go live on YouTube on New Evangelicals on Wednesdays. We have a new app that we're launching, a brand new standalone app called TNE Connect. So we do a lot of work. We're a nonprofit org. That's how we do all this stuff. It's totally paywall free. There's no financial barrier to access any of our content or our community resources.
Okay, wonderful. So we'll say goodbye to my audience, and then I'll just chat with you behind the scenes for a few minutes that I forgot to say that I like to do at the beginning when we weren't public.
Sounds good.
To just kind of check out. I'm tired. Okay,
I get it.
so thank you everyone for coming out. I really appreciate people coming to one of my rare morning live streams. And you're probably figuring out pretty quickly why I don't do too many morning live streams. So thank you everyone. And I don't know when my next live stream is, so just kind of stay tuned. So, salut à la prochaine. Thank you for watching and stay tuned. I'm Sandy, wishing your tomorrow is better than your today. And I'll do the end tag.